I had only been gone 3 weeks. Just a simple break to visit my brother's ranch up north and enjoy some peace away from work. When I left, everything was in perfect order. My lakeside property was locked up, the grass trimmed, and the gates closed. I even left a note with the HOA president, just out of courtesy, that I'd be away for a bit. Nothing unusual. But the moment I turned into my driveway that afternoon, something felt off. There were cars. Too many cars. Parked all along the road. SUVs, minivans, even a food truck. I thought maybe there was a party nearby. But then I saw people, strangers, walking straight through the edge of my yard like it was some kind of public beach. Some had towels. A few were carrying coolers. A little girl was running down toward the water, followed by 2 adults who didn't even glance at my house. I put my truck in park, stepped out, and tried to make sense of it. That's when I heard her voice. Karen. Loud, cheerful, fake. She was standing on my dock, arms stretched wide, telling a group of 5 people, "This is the best little hidden gem in the neighborhood. It's just $10 per family and you get full access for the day." I froze. $10? Before I could say anything, another couple walked right past me holding pool noodles. One of them smiled like I was the help. "You the guy renting the paddle boards?" she asked. "No," I said flatly. "I own this property." Her smile disappeared. I walked down the slope toward the dock. Karen hadn't noticed me yet. She was too busy pointing out the lake amenities, like she was giving a real estate tour. I stood just behind her and said, "So when did this become a public attraction?" She jumped a little when she turned and saw me. "Oh, you're back early," she said, like I was crashing her birthday. "What is going on, Karen?" "Well," she started, "since you weren't using the space and it's technically connected to HOA managed lands." "It's not," I interrupted. "Every inch of this lakefront is on my deed. HOA has no claim here. You know that." She gave a dismissive laugh. "Well, there was some confusion, and I thought it would be nice to let the community enjoy it while you were away. It was just sitting there." "Confusion?" I looked around at the people setting up beach chairs in my yard. "You posted online, didn't you?" She hesitated. I might have shared a few posts in the neighborhood group. I pulled out my phone and opened the HOA page. It didn't take long. She had listed exclusive lake access for $10 a day, claiming it was a new trial initiative approved for community enjoyment. There were even photos of my dock, my trees, my fire pit. "You made money off my property, Karen." Her fake smile twitched. "It wasn't like that. I used it to help cover maintenance costs. I cleaned up the shoreline, I added signs." "You added signs?" That's when I saw them. 2 signs staked into the dirt. One read, "Private lake access, community welcome," and the other said, "Please respect property. Pay before entering, ****, with a QR code. I scanned it. The link went to a Venmo account. Karen's face was right there, smiling in her profile picture like she just won the neighborhood lottery. I looked back at her. "You're trespassing. And worse." "Oh, come on, don't make a scene. Everyone's having fun. You weren't even here." "I am now." People started noticing. A few families were slowly packing up, clearly uncomfortable. Others were pretending not to notice, dipping their feet in the water, whispering. Karen lowered her voice. "Look, if this is about money, I'm happy to split what came in. I was going to donate part of it to the HOA. This has nothing to do with money. This is my land, Karen. And you've been renting it out like it's your Airbnb listing." She crossed her arms. "You're being unreasonable. And you're about to get a cease and desist." For a second, we just stared at each other. But the part that bothered me the most? She wasn't even ashamed. She actually believed she was in the right. That I'd left something too nice sitting untouched, and that gave her permission to take over. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make threats. I just turned around and walked back toward the house. But in my mind, the plan was already forming. She liked that lake view? She was about to lose it. Forever. The next morning, I was already on the phone with my lawyer before the coffee had finished brewing. I laid out everything. How Karen had used my property, sold access without my permission, and even put up signs like she was running a business. He didn't even hesitate. That's a clear violation. You have every right to shut it down immediately, he said. I asked him to draft a formal cease and desist letter. Not just to Karen, but to the HOA board as well. I wanted it in writing that this land was mine, that it had never been designated as a shared amenity, and that any further use would be considered trespassing. By noon, I had the printed letter in my hand. I slid one into Karen's mailbox and hand-delivered another copy to the HOA office. Then I went home, grabbed a hammer, and took down both of her signs. I didn't even bother being quiet about it. I let every hit echo across the lake, just in case she was watching. About 30 minutes later, she came stomping down the slope in her usual outfit: sunglasses, clipboard, fake confidence. Are you really doing this? She asked, arms crossed. No. You already did it. I'm fixing it. I already refunded everyone for this week. You didn't have to be dramatic. Karen, you sold access to my private lakefront. That's not just dramatic. That's illegal. She rolled her eyes. The community was finally enjoying the space. You never used it. You just let it sit there. I don't have to use it every day to keep it mine. She looked like she had more to say, but I was already done listening. I turned my back and walked up to the house. And to make things absolutely clear, I called a local fence company that same day. Yeah, I told the guy on the phone. I want something big. Real big. I want privacy from the property line to the dock. He laughed. Trying to keep the deer out? Not exactly. We scheduled the install for the end of the week. In the meantime, I didn't waste a second. I walked the entire edge of my lot and started planning out where I'd put the fence. I even took a drone shot of the area to get a full view from above. I wanted to make sure every inch that Karen once bragged about showing off would be completely blocked from her windows. The crazy part? The HOA wasn't even pretending to be neutral anymore. That same evening, I got an email from them expressing concern that my new fence might impact the aesthetic value of the shared lakefront. Shared? Again? I replied with a copy of my property survey, highlighted and annotated, showing exactly where the HOA boundaries ended and where mine began. I also added a friendly reminder that they'd been made aware of Karen's monetization scheme and that I was considering legal action if any of them backed her again. Strangely, no one replied. But Karen? Oh, she was trying everything. 2 days later, I caught her standing near the lake again, pointing something out to a couple of HOA board members. I couldn't hear the full conversation, but I saw one of them shaking their head. The other turned and walked off before she was done talking. Word was getting around. Neighbors started asking questions. A few of them messaged me directly. Hey, did Karen really charge people to use your yard? Did she seriously call it a community beach? One guy even apologized for bringing his kids to the lake while I was gone. Said he had no idea it wasn't common property. I didn't blame them. Karen had made it sound official. Even had a QR code to make it feel legit. But that was the thing. She counted on people not checking, not questioning, not thinking someone like her would go that far. The day the fence crew showed up, I stood at the top of the slope and watched them unload panels, tall, thick, sound-blocking privacy panels. They weren't just meant to block a view. They were meant to send a message. Karen wasn't outside that day, but I knew she saw it from her window. And that was enough. Let her try and run her lakefront business now. All she'd be staring at was a wall. If you're enjoying this wild ride, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because this ranch drama's just heating up. The fence didn't go up quietly. The crew arrived early, around 7 a.m., and by the time the sun had fully risen, the sound of power drills and hammers echoed across the neighborhood. The first few panels went in quick, rising from the ground like a fortress wall. It wasn't just a regular fence, it was nearly 8 feet tall, clean cedar, sealed and weather-treated. Each panel locked together perfectly, leaving no space to peek through. No gaps. No accidental views. From my back porch, I could already see the line it was forming, cutting a clean boundary between what was mine and what was never hers. By mid-morning, I noticed a few neighbors peeking out from their patios. Some had their phones out. A few walked their dogs a little slower past my property, trying to get a better look. They weren't used to seeing someone stand up to Karen like this. Most people either backed down or avoided her altogether. But I wasn't most people. Just after 10 a.m., as the crew broke for water, I saw her. Karen. Standing in her upstairs window, arms crossed tight, lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't come out, not yet, but she was watching. Watching as every foot of that lake view disappeared behind fresh lumber and polished screws. And I knew it was driving her insane. An hour later, she finally cracked. I was talking to one of the workers near the edge of the lot when I heard her voice ring out. "This is ridiculous," she shouted from her patio, her voice sharp and slicing. I turned slowly. She was in her robe, phone in hand, filming. "You can't put that up without board approval," she yelled. I didn't respond. I just pointed toward the property stake marker. "On my land. Fully permitted." She narrowed her eyes. "It ruins the character of the neighborhood." "No," I said, "what ruined the character was you renting out someone else's backyard like it was a public pool." She stormed back inside. A few minutes later, one of the fence guys leaned over and whispered, "That her?" I nodded. He smirked. "Yeah, figures." By late afternoon, the structure was nearly complete. Just a few final panels and the corner post near the dock. The best part? I had the crew angle the final stretch of fencing to block not just the lake, but Karen's favorite view, the spot she always stood at during her so-called tours. Now it was just warm-toned wood from end to end. A beautiful, solid wall of privacy. I made sure to install motion lights on the inside, just in case she got any wild ideas at night. The crew packed up around 6 p.m., and I tipped them generously. They knew exactly why I wanted that wall, and they didn't ask any unnecessary questions. Just got the job done. As I walked the full length of it, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: peace. Real, actual peace. The kind of quiet that didn't come with fear of another complaint, another stranger on my dock, or another fake HOA excuse. But of course, Karen wasn't done. That evening, I got a knock on the door. It was Brian from the HOA board. He looked uncomfortable. "Hey, I just wanted to check in," he said. "Karen's been blowing up the group chat." Not surprised. She's saying you built a structure that goes against the open sightline clause in the HOA guidelines. I handed him a folder. Inside was the property survey, fence permit, and a notarized statement confirming the fence was within legal height and boundaries. All backed up by county records. He flipped through it and nodded. "This is solid." "I'm done playing games," I said. "She can scream all she wants. She trespassed. She profited. I built a wall. End of story." Brian half smiled. "Honestly, a lot of people are on your side. They just won't say it out loud. Maybe they will soon." He nodded again, gave me a quiet, "Take care," and left. That night, as the sun dropped behind the hills, I sat in a chair on my side of the fence. Karen's lights were on across the way, but her windows were closed. Curtains drawn. She wanted a view? Now she had one. Just not the kind she planned. 2 days later, I woke up to find a folded piece of paper tucked into my front gate. No envelope. No name. Just a single sheet with a typed message. "Your fence violates neighborhood harmony and disrupts the visual flow of community aesthetics. Please consider removal before formal action is taken." No signature. No HA letterhead. Nothing official. I chuckled, crumpled it up, and tossed it straight into the trash. If that was supposed to scare me, it needed more teeth. Later that morning, I was walking down my driveway when I spotted Karen outside again. This time, she wasn't shouting or waving her phone around. She was pacing. Phone glued to her ear, speaking in sharp bursts like someone who wasn't getting the answers she wanted. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. But I could feel her glare. The fence had clearly done more than block a view. It had cracked something in her. Her control. Her ability to manipulate the HOA into believing she was acting for the good of the neighborhood. Now, no one was buying it. And then, just after lunch, I got a call. It was a woman from the HOA board, Cindy, one of the quieter members. "Hey," she said softly, "I don't want to get in the middle of things, but Karen's trying to call an emergency meeting." She wants to vote on a motion that would require temporary structures like fences to be reviewed retroactively. I blinked. Temporary? She's calling your fence a visual hazard and says it was constructed to intimidate residents. I laughed. That fence intimidates no one. It just blocks her view. Cindy hesitated. Look, I just wanted you to know. A few of us are tired of this. She's going too far. I thanked her for the heads up and hung up. 10 minutes later, I was in front of my laptop, typing up my own motion for the next board meeting, one to formally clarify property boundaries in the HOA handbook and ensure that private landowners couldn't be dragged into public votes over land that didn't belong to the HOA. If Karen wanted a vote, she was about to get one. Just not the kind she expected. The next day, a few of the neighbors started asking questions. Greg, a guy who lived down the street and usually kept to himself, walked by and asked, "So, is it true she tried to rent your yard like it was an Airbnb?" I nodded. He just shook his head. Unreal. I brought my nephews here a couple weekends ago. Paid her $20. Thought it was legit. You're not the only one. Then came the texts. People who had paid Karen were asking if they were in trouble. Some wanted to apologize. Others asked if she'd be refunding them. The ripple was spreading. And fast. That evening, I noticed something different. Karen's yard was empty. Her porch, always so busy with flower pots and decorations, looked stripped. Like someone was quietly preparing to move out, but didn't want to say it yet. But I wasn't about to let her sneak away from the mess she created. I printed out a large photo of the property map, clearly marked boundaries, dated and signed. Then I added a bold red sticker at the bottom that read, "Private property, not HOA land. Trespassers will be reported." I laminated it and hung it right at the base of the new fence, facing her property. Not for drama. For clarity. By the weekend, I hosted a small get-together. Just a few neighbors, nothing major, lawn chairs, soft music, a few coolers. Nothing that needed a permit. Just peace and real conversation. And that's when the stories started pouring out. Karen fined me last year for having my flag at an angle, one neighbor said. She tried to block my solar panel install, another added. She said our tree line looked aggressive. Turns out, this wasn't about a fence or a view. It was about years of control. Manipulation. Fear disguised as neighborhood management. And for the first time, people weren't just complaining about her behind closed doors. They were laughing, sharing stories, realizing she had no power left. She had taken something that wasn't hers. And now, everything she thought she controlled was slipping away, panel by panel, vote by vote, neighbor by neighbor. The HOA meeting that week felt different from every other one I'd ever attended. Normally, the room was half empty, quiet, and filled with awkward silences while Karen ran the show. But this time, nearly every seat was filled. Some folks even stood along the back wall. Word had gotten around. People were curious, some were angry, and everyone wanted to see what would happen. Karen sat at the head of the table, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual smugness was replaced by something more desperate. She adjusted her glasses every few seconds, flipped through her printed notes, and barely made eye contact with anyone. When the meeting officially began, she jumped right into it. "There's been a situation involving the use of lakefront space," she said, forcing a calm tone. "And I believe we need to review the role of visual uniformity in our neighborhood." A few heads turned. No one nodded. She continued, "I'd like to propose a retroactive review process for any permanent or semi-permanent structures built along lake access points, especially those that may obstruct shared views or disrupt the natural flow of the landscape." Translation, she wanted my fence gone. Someone in the back coughed. Another person muttered something under their breath. Karen turned to the board. "As you all know, many neighbors have enjoyed the lake area over the years. But recently, some actions have caused confusion about access and visibility. This fence, while technically on private land, has created tension. I believe it should be discussed." I raised my hand. "Point of clarification," I said. "You mean the fence I built on my own deeded property, after you monetized it without permission and invited the whole neighborhood to trespass?" A few people chuckled. Karen's jaw tightened. I did no such thing, she snapped. I offered optional access while you were away, out of community spirit. Optional? You charged money, Karen. With a QR code. And you kept the cash. One of the board members cleared their throat. Let's keep it civil. I nodded. Civility's the reason I built a fence instead of calling the cops. But now I'm the one being reviewed. Karen held up a piece of paper. I have several complaints from residents saying they feel excluded. That the fence is aggressive and unwelcoming. That's when Cindy, the quiet board member who'd warned me earlier, leaned forward. Actually, she said, I've received messages from over a dozen residents who were misled into thinking the lake was an HOA amenity. It's not. And they're upset, not about the fence, but about the lie. Karen went quiet. Then Greg, the neighbor who'd paid $20 to bring his nephews, raised his hand. Yeah, I paid for access too, he said. I thought it was official. Now I find out it was just Karen freelancing? Several others murmured in agreement. I paid twice, someone else added. And now I'm embarrassed I didn't ask questions. Karen looked like she was about to boil. Her hand shook slightly as she rearranged her papers. That money went to maintaining the area. It was a community service. I leaned forward. You made flyers, Karen. You posted ads online. You never asked permission. You just assumed ownership over something you didn't own. The room went quiet again. No one came to her defense. The board president, who'd stayed quiet until now, finally spoke. I think we've heard enough. We will not pursue retroactive action against the fence. It's legal. It's on private property. End of discussion. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but he cut her off. Furthermore, we'll be updating our HOA handbook to include clearer definitions of private versus community land. And from now on, any organized events involving shared areas must go through formal board review. He looked directly at Karen. That includes monetized access. And just like that, it was over. No vote. No support. Just silence, and Karen sinking back in her seat, blinking fast, like she couldn't quite process what had happened. But I knew what happened. The spell was broken. People weren't scared anymore. They were done letting her control every detail of their lives with rules and guilt and fake authority. And I didn't need to tear down a fence to prove a point. I'd already won. The week after the HOA meeting felt like a quiet victory parade. Not loud, not flashy, but solid. Neighbors who had once kept their heads down were suddenly waving, stopping by, or knocking on my door just to talk. Not about drama. Not about rules. Just to finally be neighbors. The first one was Steve from across the cul-de-sac. He'd never said more than a polite morning in passing before. But that Tuesday, he brought over a basket of muffins his wife made and said, I gotta admit, I didn't think anyone could stand up to her. But man, you did it right. I didn't need muffins. But I appreciated the gesture. Because what he was really handing over was trust. Then came a few of the younger families, ones I'd seen getting scolded before by Karen for noisy kids, or bikes left too close to the curb. One dad, Jason, told me Karen once threatened to fine him for letting his dog walk too close to her hydrangeas. Now he just wanted to know what kind of stain I'd used on the fence panels. Said he was thinking of putting up something similar. People weren't just talking now, they were planning. For the first time in years, it felt like we weren't living under a microscope. Like we could breathe. On Thursday, I was out near the lake, checking the dock planks for any damage, when I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. It was Emily. She was a college student who'd grown up in the neighborhood. Her parents still lived a few houses down, and she'd come home for the summer. I just wanted to say thanks, she said. You probably don't realize this, but what you did, it kind of shifted everything. I looked up, confused. People used to be scared, she continued. To say anything. To do anything. My mom stopped planting flowers because Karen left a note saying the colors were too vibrant for the HOA look. Stuff like that adds up. She sat down on the edge of the dock, dipping her feet in the water. You building that fence? That wasn't just about privacy. That was the first time someone told her no and made it stick. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't done it for applause. I just wanted to be left alone. But I could see it now. It wasn't just about me anymore. Karen's silence had become louder than her rules. Her blinds stayed closed. Her yard, once the most decorated on the block, was now bare. No flags. No garden signs. Even her plastic gnome collection had disappeared overnight. The very next weekend, I decided to host something. Nothing wild, just a casual barbecue by the lake. No flyers. No public invites. Just a few families I knew, and anyone who walked by was welcome to join. I pulled out the grill, set up a few chairs, and filled a cooler with sodas and ice. Music played low from a speaker. The air smelled like hickory smoke and freshly mowed grass. And people came. Some brought lawn chairs, others brought chips or drinks. No one asked for permission. No one waited for approval. Kids ran down to the dock with fishing poles. Parents shared stories over paper plates. Someone even brought a dog that ended up stealing a hot dog right off the grill. We all laughed. For the first time, the lake felt like what it was always supposed to be, a place to relax. To enjoy. To connect. Not a rented attraction. Not a source of drama. Just peace. I glanced across the water once. Karen's house sat there, still and silent. No one on the patio. No blinds opening. Just the tall fence cutting off her view completely. Maybe she was watching. Maybe not. But either way, it didn't matter anymore. The neighborhood had moved on. People who'd tiptoed around her rules were now stretching out in lawn chairs, barefoot and happy, trading stories and recipes. The fear she once held over everyone was gone. And all it took was a wall, not to keep people out, but to keep her influence from seeping in any longer. The lake was calm. The grill sizzled. And the stories kept flowing. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. Not to her. Not to anyone. The next morning, I sat out on my porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the soft hum of birds and the light breeze dancing across the lake. The scent of charcoal and hickory still lingered in the air from the night before. Empty folding chairs were scattered along the shore, a few soda cans sat on the table, and someone had left a pair of flip-flops by the dock. I didn't mind. It all felt real, like a living memory that hadn't fully faded yet. I heard a knock at my gate. It was Brian, another HOA board member. The same one who'd quietly supported me during the fence drama. "Morning," he said with a slight smile. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I said, waving him through. "Coffee?" He nodded, and we sat under the awning while the sun crept higher. After a few sips, he leaned back and said, "You know, there was a time I thought Karen was good for the HO." I raised an eyebrow. "You and half the neighborhood." He sighed. "She kept things organized. Filed the reports. Handled the landscaping schedules. But it wasn't until this whole lake mess that I realized all of that came with strings." I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say anything. The silence was full of truth. "She weaponized rules," he continued. "Used them like levers. If someone didn't fall in line, suddenly their mailbox was an issue. Or their lawn was non-compliant. The handbook was never the problem. It was how she bent it to serve her." I nodded. "That's why people stopped speaking up." He looked out toward the lake. "Until now." There was a long pause between us. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then Brian reached into his bag and pulled out a folder. He slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Official HOA policy update. We took your motion from last month and expanded it. Clear boundary recognition, protections for private property owners, and," he paused, "removal of board members who misuse authority or misrepresent HOA powers." I flipped through the pages slowly, eyes scanning the bold headers. "Karen stepping down," he said finally. "Voluntarily, but it was that or be voted out." I exhaled, not with relief, but something close to closure. I didn't expect it to go that far. Brian shrugged. "Neither did we." But she overplayed her hand. After he left, I stayed out there a while longer, watching a heron land gently on a log at the edge of the water. Everything felt quieter these days. Not just around me, but inside too. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a walk down the fence line. The wood had settled nicely. Still straight, still sturdy. Not a single board had shifted. I ran my hand along the smooth edge, thinking about how something so simple, just a row of wood, could carry so much weight. About halfway down, I saw something strange, a plastic bag hanging from one of the fence hooks. It was tied carefully, not tossed. Inside was a handwritten note. I was wrong. I got carried away. I thought I was helping this place stay special. But maybe I just made it worse. K. No apology. Not really. But not nothing either. I left the bag where it was. I wasn't sure if I needed to respond. Maybe silence was the best answer. That evening I fired up the grill again. Not for a party, not for the neighborhood, just for me. A couple burgers, some corn on the cob. The lake reflected the pink and orange clouds like glass. No crowds, no noise, just the soft crackle of fire and the occasional ripple from a fish jumping. Across the lake, Karen's house sat still. I noticed her curtains were open for the first time in weeks. She could see the fence now. All of it. Every single board. But she could also see the smoke rising, hear the quiet laughter of neighbors nearby, smell the cookout in the air. That wall didn't isolate me. It protected something worth keeping. And somehow, it brought the right people closer. A few weeks passed, and things around the lake found a new rhythm. Peaceful mornings. Quiet evenings. Neighbors walking their dogs without glancing nervously at their yards. It was as if the whole community had finally unclenched its fists. What surprised me the most was how many people started using their own spaces again, planting flowers, repainting porches, even putting up those little garden flags Karen once hated so much. It was like that fence didn't just block a view. It broke some invisible grip she had on everyone's behavior. One Saturday morning, I was restaining the dock when I heard laughter coming from down the hill. Not the usual polite kind, but loud, belly-deep laughter. Kids were chasing each other through sprinklers in the Andersons' yard, and someone was grilling again, this time 2 houses over. I smiled. Not because it was my victory, but because that sound, that freedom, hadn't been around here in a long time. Later that day, Greg, who once unknowingly paid Karen for access to my lake, showed up at my fence with a big Tupperware container and a sheepish grin. "Ribs," he said. "Bribery for all the noise." I laughed. "You're always welcome, man." We stood by the fence, chatting like old friends, even though we'd barely known each other before the whole incident. He told me how the HOA had quietly voted in 2 new board members. No speeches. No debates. Just a quiet reshuffling to balance things out. People were tired of fear. They were ready for change. A few days later, I noticed something strange on my calendar. It was a reminder I'd set months ago, before all this started. I'd planned to host a neighborhood fishing day. Nothing formal, just a way to meet folks by the water and share a few coolers and some bait. Back then, I canceled it out of frustration, convinced that any gathering would just stir the pot. But now felt different. So I pulled the old flyer draft back up on my computer, changed the date, printed off a handful of copies, and dropped them at mailboxes the next morning. No rules, no fees, just bring your own gear. Show up hungry. I'll bring the grill. By noon on Saturday, people were arriving in folding chairs. Teenagers with tackle boxes. Grandparents with lawn chairs and lemonade jugs. Someone even brought a portable speaker and played soft blues as the sun climbed over the trees. No one asked who approved the event. No one worried about permits. They just came. Because it finally felt okay to come. Karen didn't show, of course. Her blinds stayed drawn, even with all the laughter drifting over. But a few neighbors mentioned seeing a "for sale" sign quietly appear in her front yard just a few days earlier. No announcement. No goodbye. Just a silent retreat. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't mock it. Honestly, I barely reacted at all. Because at that point, the Real win had already happened. It was in how the lake sounded again. In how people looked each other in the eye when they passed. In the kid who asked me how to cast a line, and the dad who grilled next to me and offered tips on ribs. We stayed by the water until the sky turned purple and the fireflies came out. Someone started a small campfire. Others brought out marshmallows. A guitar came out, And suddenly it was like we were part of some small-town movie scene you'd never expect from a place that used to feel so tense. The fence stood strong at the edge of it all, not a barrier, but a boundary. It didn't keep the fun in or keep anyone out. It simply reminded people where the line had always been. And for once, everyone respected it. No fights. No whispers. No fake rules. Just neighbors. Just life. And just a little bit of smoke curling into the night sky, rising up like a quiet reminder that everything had changed, and no one wanted to go back.